So, if we think about other types of market failures besides the existence of negative or positive externalities, one thing that we want to focus on is the existence of public goods. And so, public goods, we generally think of things that are non-rival and non-excludable. And so, a rival good means that if I use it, you can't use it. So, if I eat this bowl of ice cream, you can't eat that bowl of ice cream. It's just not possible, right? Non-rival means that if I use it, you can still use it, right? If think about if we're both looking up at a movie screen. If I'm watching the movie, you can still watch the movie, right? My watching it doesn't have any effect on whether you watch it, although the jokes that I make while I'm watching it may or may not detract from your experience. Then non-excludable means, can we exclude people, right, and from watching it? So if we think about a park, usually that's a non-rival good, but we could put a gate up at the park and say, no, no, you can't come in. Sorry. And so non-rival and non-excludable goods, the sort of bottom right category here, includes public goods and VADs. So they have some examples: view of lunar eclipse, of public broadcasts, knowledge, right, the rules of math, national defense, noise and air pollution. Excludable goods that are non-rival are public goods that are artificially scarce, right? So things like subscription TV, uncongested toll roads, and those are things that they don't have to be excludable, but we put in some institution in place to make it excludable. Whereas rival and non-excludable are those sort of common pool resources where, if I can go fishing and you can go fishing, well, if I catch a fish, you can't catch that same fish, but I might not be able to keep you out. And so that can cause problems. We talked about that a little bit in chapter 4. Um, and so public goods can be a cause of market failure, um, mostly because markets generally allocate private goods, right? And so for the other three types of goods, remember private goods were in that top left-hand corner, markets are either not possible or they're likely to fail, right? So non-rival goods have a marginal cost of zero. So the price to be Pareto efficient should be zero. But unless you provide some sort of subsidy, right, or the government just provides it, we'll never get to the price equals marginal cost point, because there's some fixed cost, but basically zero marginal cost. And it's also impossible to set a price for non-excludable goods because you can't exclude those who haven't paid, right? So, if you say, okay, well, you have to pay $5, but I get to have the good whether or not I pay the $5. Well, that doesn't usually work. Um, so, one example that might be important would be like a community irrigation project, right, which would benefit other farmers. But can you make sure that they pay? Can you write a contract that guarantees some Pareto efficient irrigation level? That may not be possible, in which case you might need the power of the government to go in, tax all the farmers, based on how they would benefit, and then do the irrigation project. So another market failure besides public goods is asymmetric information. And asymmetric just means unequal, right? So with asymmetric information, it means I know something you don't know, or you know something I don't know. And we can think of two forms of asymmetric information. One is a hidden action, meaning that I can do something that you can't observe, which leads to a moral hazard. So if you think about unemployment, involuntary unemployment, because employers cannot observe employees' exact work effort, right? We talked about that in chapter 6. And so there's some moral hazard as if you're my employer, you don't really know how hard I'm working. And that can cause a problem in that work contract. And then there's hidden attributes, right, which leads to an adverse selection. And so, the canonical example in economics is used cars. So if I'm selling you my used car and you say, well, is it in good shape? And I say, oh, yes, very good shape. But unless you're a mechanic, you might not have the ability to go through the car and see, what's going on, and whether it's actually a quality car or not. And in that case, you might not be willing to pay what the car is actually worth if it is good quality, because there's a chance that it's not good quality. So let's go through some examples, because these are really important markets, actually. And so health insurance is one example. There's a paper written in the 1960s by Ken Arrow that basically said health insurance just doesn't work in a market situation. And the reason is that there is both adverse selection and moral hazard, right? So if you allow people to buy health insurance whenever they want, then they're not going to buy health insurance until they need it, right? They're going to say, oh, I've got some pain in my side. I'm a little worried about what it is. I'll go buy health insurance and then I can go to the doctor. But then the only people who buy health insurance are going to be those people who are sick. And that means that the price of health insurance is going to be really high. And so it's not going to work, right? The healthier people who should be buying insurance will remain uninsured. And this was, this is the big problem, for an economy like the United States that doesn't have national health insurance. And this is the reason that the ACA, which is often known as Obamacare, required people to buy health insurance or face some penalty. Uh, Another example is car insurance, right? So, and this is why car insurance is required basically in every state, is that if you have insurance, you don't necessarily know, you might be making some people more likely to drive dangerously. And it's interesting because so there are starting to be car insurance companies that will measure how you are driving with some GPS type thing, either your phone or something that plugs into the car, and offering discounts on insurance for those people who drive safely. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that develops because previously, obviously, that wasn't available. And this is the reason, sort of teenage boys tended to cost more to insure than teenage girls. Um, so that's another type of asymmetric information focused more on moral hazard. And then the banking system is rife with some of these things because the borrower and the lender, that's really what the banking system is all about, is people who deposit money who are basically becoming lenders to people who want to borrow money. And it's really hard to know what that borrower is going to do with the money, right? Unless they're using it to, say, buy a house or buy a car, it's very clear. And so poor borrowers are often credit constrained. And another problem is that, depositors have deposit insurance, and so they often don't care what the banks do. And that means that banks have an incentive to make riskier loans because they get a higher interest rate and earn more profits. And if they think that the government will just bail them out if they go out of business, that provides a bad incentive for them to take on riskier behavior.